And welcome to Taylor Report, CIUT 89.5 FM. I'm Phil Taylor. And you can write to us, Taylor at CIUT.FM. Today we're going to talk with Thomas Mountain in Eritrea about the recent New York Times headline announcing that there was a coup underway, it was a feature story, and it turned out there wasn't a coup underway. So we want to ask Thomas about how such odd things get into the news, get into the mix, and who's behind them. We're joined now by, the full name is Mr. B, Sam B, a good friend. Anyway, Sam B knows about the Eritrean matter. We weren't able to reach Thomas Mountain, but Sam B knows wherever he speaks. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Phil.
And I want to ask you, of course, the big story is this, the coup that never happened. And it's kind of like a Graham Greene novel or something. What is this story about? How did it get in the New York Times? What do you think about it?
Well, it is correct to say it was an imaginary coup, or a coup that took place on Twitter and later found its way into New York Times. But
it started with a Twitter report? Is that what it was?
Well, it's very strange. Even before any events took place in Eritrea, somebody 2 hours before was tweeting that there was a coup. And somebody must have had a heads up of what was going to happen. And we cannot explain the fact that even somebody would call this a coup. Imagine if 100 guys went into the ministry, took over the building. How does that constitute a coup to begin with?
Yes. Wishful thinking. Yeah.
Right. But it seems that when it comes to Eritrea, facts don't matter. The objective reality on the ground does not matter. There is a concerted effort to create at least the impression of that there is a chaos in Eritrea. And I think it's being done in an effort to dissuade certain investors from going there and helping develop the economy. And there are certain quarters, obviously, unhappy with Eritrea and unhappy with the fact that Eritrea managed to kick out practically all the NGOs. And ever since it did that, it went on to triple its GDP. But if you read anything about Eritrea, that you will get the impression that actually the economy is collapsing. But how does the economy collapse when its GDP has grown since 2004 by like 4 times?
That's a very good point, because very often people talk about the collapse of the American economy, et cetera, but there are certain people, if you look at them, they don't seem to be collapsing. They're doing quite well. But when they turned the light on Eritrea, or any country that is out of step with the U.S. Or Britain, France, and it's as though there's a kind of journalistic law. You must say bad things. And for example, what I notice is they immediately trot out all kinds of tired old expressions to describe the leaders of the country, they call it like a hermit country. They have a bunch of terms, and it was like they dumped them all right on top of this phony coup story as a kind of an exercise. But they did get caught. I mean, this story really collapsed, and there was some individuals involved. And the Times interviewed them, and they said, "Oh, here's the go-to man. He'll tell you about Eritrea." Now, what did you make of them? Who are these guys?
Well, to be honest with you, they're the sort of individuals that don't merit any mention. They have no following, and there's a lot of them.
Well, they're Americans, by the way, aren't they? I mean, one of them is a guy who lives in
Don Cornell,
Massachusetts.
Yeah. He is a professor and studied Eritrea. He associated himself with some people that sort of tried to organize.
Didn't he have a reputation once of being a super leftist?
Oh, well, yeah.
Isn't that right?
He was a communist, criticizing certain Eritreans for not being socialist or communist enough, and now he's working for Freedom House, and you cannot get any more right-wing than Freedom House.
Well, there's good money. When they say sell out, that does involve money.
Oh, yeah. I'm pretty sure he's doing well for selling out. But he is on a mission to organize at least some parts of the Eritrean diaspora into a cohesive opposition force. And like sometime in 2009, WikiLeaks revealed actually the American ambassador in Eritrea practically said, since the Eritreans at home are not going to do anything, How about we try and organize the diaspora into a cohesive force?
As they did with Libyans and Syrians.
Practically, but for for a lot of great reasons, that is not working out for them, and they've sort of resorted into creating phantom stories, probably in order to generate some more revenue.
I wonder if they think maybe they bet too much on this individual we're talking about, because I mean he's seriously discredited right now, don't you think?
You would think, but they have nobody else to go to.
He did have to come forward and say, I think we got a little overboard. I saw an interview with him. I think the Times carried it. But, you know, the Times went to great pains. I mean, they put it's Jeffrey Gettleman, and he's, where is he based with this story? Kenya. Yeah. And they were like all set to go. And certainly the fellow in Massachusetts who we're speaking of, what's his name, Connell?
Dan Connell, yeah.
I would say he's probably was about 48 hours, 24 hours from being on CNN. He might have already made it to that plane.
He made it into a lot of shows, and he got a lot of people's hopes up, mainly non-Eritreans, because Eritreans were calling home, and people back home were surprised when they didn't know what they were talking about.
Well, they wanted a springtime for Eritrea, and they played a little thing with us. Many of us who do the programming and follow these things have been galled at the way they try to create a term called the Twitterverse and Twitter revolution. And they said, well, they succeeded in Egypt and they succeeded in Libya because of this new phenomenon. However, here it seems to be Twitter that showed them up, right?
Brilliant friends from Eritrea, actually. They went on Facebook and they started tweeting that we're right in front of the building. There's some commotion, but there's nothing else. And
photographs.
I mean, they sent photographs. Oh, you know what? There's even an interesting story with Al Jazeera. The same crew, they started organizing another lie right after this coup d'etat failed on their face. Mm-hmm. They went about, and this included Reporters Without Borders, by the way. They went around telling people that Eritrea has started blocking Al Jazeera. And the same people started tweeting back from back in Eritrea. So we're watching Al Jazeera right now, and they start sending pictures with timestamp on them. And that also failed. But the ambassador, South Africa's ambassador to Eritrea, a South African guy, was surprised when he heard the story, and on his Facebook, he practically asked, "Who's creating this fiction about Eritrea?" Mm-hmm. But none of this crowd, like not even Reporter Without Borders, came out clean. I mean, they tried to say somebody misinformed us, but if you are a reporter, you just don't take somebody's lie. And they practically ignored the people that were writing from back home, and they cherry-picked the stories that would create the impression of chaos, or the Eritrean government is afraid of information, and they closed Al Jazeera and all this nonsense.
We have Reporters Without Borders, and we also have Reporters Without Scruples. Wow. I started the show here talking about Mr. Watson in the Star, who is in Aleppo. I don't know why he bothered to go, because the readers here would like to know who are these armed groups who seem to be totally reckless in their violence, and also what are their goals. He didn't report. He's there, but he doesn't answer the simplest question. He could have written that Assad is a dictator. You could do that if you're an editorial job at the Star. You can do that. Or you can call the people revolutionaries. But if you're a reporter, one assumes you're going to tell us how you know that.
Well, and not only that, we have to remember that these guys are not interested in context or content, really. They already have a story in mind that they want to write about, and facts just get in the way, so they just ignore them. Mm-hmm. But anybody that was following, especially this coup story, would have told you from the very first hour that this story was not going to fly. But it did somehow in every newspaper. But, you know, the real problem with Eritrea is Eritrea's policy. And as you know, mm-hmm. Eritrea is very strict about the self-reliance policy, about not relying on NGO. And you should read, actually, President
being a sovereign country, it means something to him.
Exactly. And you should read President Isaias's paper on aid, and you'd be blown away. He was writing in 1997 what people like Dambisa Moyo and everybody is talking about now.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference with Eritrea is that our government was in a position to implement its policies. And you can see by the fact that there is one country, the only one country in Africa that is not taking aid, and yet managed to triple its GDP since stopped taking aid.
If they don't take aid, that would probably be the earliest sign that the State Department believes regime change might be the appropriate step.
Yeah, the regime change policy has been in place for quite some time.
This is Sam Bee, and he knows what he speaks of. When we're talking about the phony report in the New York Times that there was a coup when there wasn't a coup, or even an attempt, and there wasn't even a dangerous man on the street. Did the Eritreans hear about all this? What did they make it? Did they have their press cover this much?
Well, the government has made a statement and explained on what took place, and it did not really mince its words and admitted there were 4 guys that took their unit. They didn't even tell their unit what was happening. The unit was told by its leaders that it was being transferred to guard the information ministry. And they got there when these guys started to go into the ministry and try to force the ministry to broadcast certain demands. Mm-hmm. A clever technician pulled the plug and nothing got aired. And when the soldiers found out what was going on inside, they turned on their leaders and they caught them all.
So the soldiers caught the troublemakers. The
troublemakers and they arrested them.
They didn't have to have a meeting of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to solve this problem.
Well, not quite. It was never a big problem. But for a peaceful country like Eritrea, that usually very sedated, nothing happens. Maybe it may look like a big story, but what are 4 guys going to do, and how do you explain 4 guys taking over a ministry as a coup d'état? Is something else, something. Yeah,
but you indicated that somebody was tipped, or sort of like someone knew this was going to happen, so that
otherwise, how could they tweet 2 hours before the fact?
Yes. Yeah. Well, we've been talking to Sam Bee, and boy, Sam, we're really glad that you were available, because our old friend Thomas Mountain, we were unable to reach him. I hope we can talk to him. He wrote a good piece, we should remind everybody, in the Counterpunch. If you want to see, Tom always takes everything with a grain of salt and laughs at it, and he has a nice laughing piece. And Counterpunch, just put in the name Tom Mountain, an unforgettable name, by the way, and you will be able to access that, and it is an enjoyable piece. And Sam Bee, again, I want to thank you very, very much for filling in and informing us on all these matters.
Thank you, Phil. We always appreciate it.
And